We look at the mechanics of the cross block and how they are used in different martial art styles.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
If you give someone who has never done martial arts two weapons and tell the person to block an attack, they will probably do a cross block. We see that in a lot of pop culture, it's everywhere, and we want to look at the mechanics because there is something to look at. Unlike common belief, if I take two swords, like here katana and wakizashi, and just cross them, this is not a very stable position until I reach the hand protection. Of course, there are different weapon designs where this is different. For example, I can take a tonfa and have it in hammer hold and then make a very stable type of cross block. But in other weapons from Okinawa and Kobudo, like with the Zai, I have the same problem as with the swords. The cross slides down until it hits the hand protection. I can, of course, do a trick with this weapon because it's very flexible, turn it around, and then we are in the same range as with the tonfa and hammer hold, and here cross block works without any sliding effects. But it seems in general that there's a misconception about cross blocking. Let's go for American martial arts here. We take a cutlass and a tomahawk. And the normal cross block will not help a lot. But I can use the tomahawk to support the cutlass and have a very effective block that gives me a lot of control. And that's what a lot of the cross block ideas are about. It's about support. If I use sword and zai here, I do a kind of a cross, but I don't block with the cross. The one blade is lying on the hand protection of the other. I can also do that with a wakizashi or with a tonfa or whatever. That definitely works, but it's not exactly what most people envisage for a cross block. But I have to state it again, the normal cross is not stable. Look here, two shashkas that lack a hand protection don't produce a really useful cross, but I can still use the one to support the blade of the other to have a powerful block and control, upwards and downwards. But there are weapons without hand protection that I can use for cross blocks. There's classical kata with the tonfa, not in hammer grip where I do that. Yeah, but here the lever is different. And if you flip out the tonfa, you can already recognize that the lever is no longer that much to your advantage, and you have to use certain tricks that we also use with the stick. So let's look at the stick next. Unlike most swords, but like the shashka we just saw, the stick lacks hand protection. That means enough pressure will make any cross either collapse onto my hands or worse, even fold in. Therefore, cross blocks with the stick are in fact not crosses, but strikes. And you can train that nicely in drills. You basically try to repel the incoming stick by a scissor type motion of the two sticks that push back the attacking stick of the opponent. This can be either symmetrical or one stick can make more of a block while the other one then does kind of a sweep away. Depends a bit what you want. The asymmetric form is a good preparation if you want to transfer this into weaponless training, where you can then block with the stick and use the hand to sweep away the incoming attack of the opponent. This means the second hand brings more security into the defense. And that is especially important if I have no stick against the stick. Then I use cross blocks with the hand, one for taking in, one for sweeping aside so that not too much force is on my arm. Of course, the cross block can also absorb a lot of energy, like here against the knee, but if I have the choice, I would always use one arm for more of a sweeping motion to get rid of part of the energy. Important note on the stick, although it lacks a hand protection, we can still do supported type of blocks by using the arm to support either one stick and attack with the other, or use always the other arm to support the other stick, which then distributes the force nicely, but often not in a cross. Let's go back to the weaponless stuff. If we play pushing hands, we can recognize that we often have cross block situations, and it's very common to see that. In Wing Chun, these are Gansao or Scissor Gansao and Kwansao, and these motions help to transfer force from one arm onto the other one, or redirecting it onto the other side. Of course, there are people that argue that you should never tie two hands on one hand, because then it's easier to get trapped and the opponent has one hand free. But this transition to pass the force or the hand or a stick or whatever from one side to the other is super common in basically all martial arts and may be a factor why so many people think a cross block is a good idea. But that's here of course a bit different from the common recognition of the cross block. Maybe something that comes closer to the idea was what we already showed with weaponless defense against a armed attacker, because there we have initially a crossblock like it's commonly perceived, but in detail it is what we see here. It's in fact a passing motion. That's in fact what it comes down to here in pushing hands as well, and as it is taught in some Wing Chun styles, you can, for example, take the incoming attack with a Kwansao so that the force is distributed over two arms, and then where there's more pressure, this arm will take it and sweep it aside and the other one becomes free. And I think this is the core of it, where the misunderstanding of the cross block comes from. It's not about a static thing, it's about a dynamic thing with redirecting. And also when we transfer this to weapons, we see that all the time. In principle, it can be especially well seen with the buckler, because here the roles of the hands are clear. The buckler protects the weapon hand. And if we look at it here in pushing hand style exercises, the buckler often crosses over the sword arm. This is a technique that has been used in the early 14th or late 13th century, as it is documenting by the so-called Tower Fechtbuch. And it's not easy to spot always, but I've marked it here. So also in the weapon type training and fighting, we see the similar pattern as with the pushing hands. We have a passing from one side to the other commonly. The reality or the basic mechanics of the cross blocks may therefore be different from what is commonly perceived, but the cross block is in fact a common thing with all the different weapons and basically in all martial arts styles. Hope we could inspire you. See you around next time.